Britain is calling on Israel to allow aid into Gaza. But when a Foreign Office minister repeated that call in the Commons yesterday, stop and change course immediately, he said to the Israeli government, some Labour MPs called out, or what? There is a feeling among some in the party that not enough is actually being done by the government to put pressure on Israel. Indeed, the minister himself seemed to accept that not enough had been done in the past. Sarah Champion is on the line, who is chair of the International Development Committee of the Commons and the Labour MP for Rotherham. Morning to you.
Morning, Justin.
What more should they be doing?
Oh, there's lots more that they should and could be doing. And I pressed the minister on this a couple of days ago. I mean, first of all, they should be clear and consistent in calling out the potential violations of international humanitarian law. I mean, for example, we know that civilians are dying in mass numbers. We know that medical facilities are being targeted. We know that aid isn't going in. All of these are war crimes. They are breaches of the international humanitarian law. We also know that the ICJ last July ruled that the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank is unlawful. That's an advisory. We're still waiting on our government to make their decision if they do or don't accept the advisory. And there are things within that. So, for example, we ought to be calling for the dismantle of settlements. We ought to be calling for reparation. We ought to be calling for the return of Palestinians. So what is so frustrating is that there are a lot more tools that we could be using, and it feels very much like we're just sitting on our hands at the moment.
When you say calling for the return of Palestinians, to where? To Gaza?
Well, they would be going to wherever in Palestine they wanted, and that leads on to another thing.
Hang on, so just to be clear about this, to people who don't follow it, you're calling for the return into
Palestine in its whole, so the West Bank.
Into Israel?
Into the West Bank, which is currently occupied by Israel, which the ICJ, the International Court, ruled was unlawful.
But not the wider right of return that Palestinians often talk about to the whole of what is now Israel.
Well, they've been displaced internally. It's been forced displacement, which is a war crime, which has been called out. So what we're saying is, for example, that sanctions ought to be put on the settlers and the settler organisations that are forcing Palestinians to move from their homes. It's so frustrating when there are many other tools that we could be using, that instead we're just saying, oh, this is awful, oh, something has to give, oh, there might be a ceasefire soon. We need to see very robust action from our government, and they're trying, but they're not trying hard enough.
But when you talk about robust action, and you've come up with a list of things that you think they ought to be doing, or at least saying, and I suppose that's the crucial thing, that these are words and that the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu will ultimately take no notice of them.
And that's the frustration. I mean, we do have the Geneva Convention that came out in 1949 after the Second World War to try and prevent wars, basically. And when there are conflicts, for them to be done in a measured way. What we're seeing across the world is that there aren't any actions to hold people accountable, to hold states accountable when they are breaching those international laws. And that weakens all of us. So we do have some things directly that we could be doing. We could be doing sanctions, for example. We could be sanctioning the individuals that we know are, so politicians that are very directly leading on the calls for breaches of international law. We could be holding to account, as we have with some, the settlers that we know are acting sort of most egregiously towards the Palestinian people. But they're really, I think what we need is, and Tom Fletcher tried this, the UN humanitarian lead, we need the UN Security Council to be speaking with one voice, because what's happening at the moment is one or two states will come up and say this is dreadful and we'll try and do something. We need to be speaking with one voice now, because people are literally dying of starvation. 1 in 5 people in Gaza is going to die of starvation unless we do something rapidly.
And of course, what Israel would say to that is, well, it could end very rapidly, all of this, because the hostages who should not be there should be released, those who are still alive, and more widely, Hamas, who have done so much violence in Israel, but also do terrible violence to the people of Gaza, ought to disarm.
And I have complete sympathy with that. I mean, it is disgusting what has been happening to the hostages, and the terror attack is something that no one will ever forget. But we have to remember that the ceasefire that was in place, the hostages were a very crucial part of that. And all of the hostages that have been released so far have been due to negotiations. It hasn't been due to dropping bombs on civilians.
Do you have a sense that Donald Trump is, when we were talking about this to Jeremy Byrne, our international editor, an hour or so ago on the programme, that there is now some daylight between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu in a way that might persuade the Israelis to change course in a way that the British government wouldn't be able to do, but he could?
Yes, I think that that's very much true. I think there has been a definite shift in the last couple of days, if I'm quite honest. I think the level of frustration around the world is reaching a tipping point where I do think that, for example, it was very strong of Tom Fletcher to say, there are all the indicators of genocide. There absolutely are, and there have been for months and months and months. When you're starting to see people use words like that, which is a legal term, which does have very severe consequences. I mean, please, whatever it takes, we have to start seeing the Israeli politicians listening to this. And I think that Trump does want this sorted out. It's not a good look when he's made all of these promises and around the world, all of these peace deals that he was going to get are not being delivered. So I think that he does need to use any influence that he's got to try and stop this, because I don't know about you, Justin, I can't cope anymore seeing these people starving. I can't cope. My committee is meeting the humanitarian workers who are the only eyes and ears that we've got on the ground. We meet them when they come out of there. And the stories, they're unimaginably barbaric. And this is a democracy doing this on an occupied people that can't get out of harm's way. It's horrific.
Should the British government use the word genocide?
This is where we start dancing on the head of a pin, isn't it?
But you say, as you say, the word is powerful.
I think
and would be powerful if it came from the British government. They don't at the moment. They say let's wait for the court to decide, etc. Should they not wait?
I think that they could absolutely say there are all the indicators of genocide. The problem, and I feel listeners taking an intake of breath and rolling their eyes, it's a legal definition. But what we do know is that there are people starving. There are civilians that are clearly being targeted. There's forced transfer going on. Before all of this kicked off in Gaza, it was described by the UN as an open prison. It's people can't get out of harm's way. They can't move and they can't get food in. What else do we call it?
Right. Sarah Champion, Chair of the International Development Committee of the Commons. Thank you.